Welcome back to Two Chaps, Many Cultures Friday, episode 170. How are you wherever you are in the world? I hope you are bringing some humanity into your world this weekend, which we're going to talk about today, actually. In a world that we are absorbing so much information and we're trying to learn as much as we can, and learning is becoming so multidimensional. We're going to talk to somebody today who's trying to instill or trying to bring back humanity into learning with various practices and things that he's bringing to the world of learning. So we're going to learn about that today with humanity. Stick around. How are you, sir?
I feel very human.
That's right. It's human. It's time to be human.
It's human. This is Humanity Friday. Even cleaned my glasses to better see you.
Look at you.
Yeah, I have vision now. I have visions, or that's an old bad joke in Germany. If you have visions, you need to go see a doctor. That's a bad dad joke. I should have not started a Friday episode with a bad dad joke. All right, but talking about German and not a joke, we have somebody here who brings humanity to learning, or who reinstills the human aspect of learning, and rather than being bombarded with information that our brains have a hard time filtering in a resourceful way. Let's hear it from our friend, co-practitioner, overall teaching genius, Bastian Küntzel, joining us live from where from?
I'm in Wrocław in Poland.
Glad to have you, Bastian. And you might notice, dear audience, as you're watching this from wherever in the world, you'll see that banner that we have every day. We want to know where in the world you are. So we have somebody in Poland, somebody in Chicago, somebody in Atlanta. And we also have a bit of a technical glitch today that we weren't able to figure out before we went live. So you'll see our mic symbols come on next to our names on and off. And whenever you hear an echo, it's not because you're drunk midday, where that may very well be the case. I'm not judging, but it could also simply be the fact that we're having difficulties figuring our audio out. So bear with us. Welcome, Bastian. Thanks for being here. And we announced that there's going to be an Aussie and two Germans speaking Polish and English with each other. So I showcase the English, you guys to the Polish, because I have no idea.
Dobry wieczór, Bastian from Wrocław, Poland, and that will be the end of my Polish, because I think Bastian will probably speak Polish a lot better than I do. But welcome, sir. Thank you for making time this Friday evening for coming along. And Bastian is well known in the world of in the intercultural world as somebody who brings some innovative learning to the way that we deliver our content for both. No, I'm assuming that, and I don't know your practice of work, Bastian. You've written a book about this. We're going to talk about your book. But in terms of what is the thing that drives you towards what you do, and what has what has brought you to practicing what you've described as bringing humanity into learning?
Yeah, that's a nice question. So I think what brought me into this was as a young person, as a teenager, I participated in international youth exchanges and international youth camps, and I just felt so at home in this in-between space, where there were people from all over the world, there were people from all kinds of different backgrounds, but in this place where we were making something else. We were creating our own little worlds. And I think this is where I felt really comfortable, when there wasn't one way of being, or there wasn't one predetermined way of being. There was a way of being together that had a lot to do with the organizational culture and had a lot to do with whoever was there and what they brought and how that then came together. And then from that, I went into things like human rights education and participation of young people in society and citizenship and intercultural learning in the context of just youth activism. And I think that's really instilled in me this very strong desire for just allowing people to be who they are and live in dignity and express themselves and be in the world as they are and as who they are and be beautiful in that way. And I think the way how I do this today in the work that I do as an intercultural trainer, but also working a lot with leadership, and now a lot more also helping other trainers and facilitators refine their training and facilitation skills, is around just accepting the own complexity of your own humanity, and also seeing the people who you accompany on their learning journey as who they are, including the culture that they were raised in, or the cultural influences that they have, but also all the other influences, from personality to ambitions and dreams and struggles and priorities and all of these things that make us so beautifully messed up as human beings. And I think this is what I really like. Humans we are a weird species, man. To just acknowledge the fact that what we are and who we are as a species is incredibly, magnificently weird, and there is a degree to which we have control over what we do, and there is a huge degree over where we have no control over how we create reality, and then we just act as if that is real. And it's beautiful to untangle that and to have some kind of acceptance, but also caring tenderness for this mess that we're all in, that is, being alive as a human being today.
That's fantastic. And I've seen you present, and you're on YouTube. People can find the way you present, and even the way you're talking now, and you use the word youth a lot, right, from your background, your experience. So do you think that basically that experience of working with as a young person with young person has carried you through into your current practice? Because, you do a lot of, you're very animated, you're very playful, and you're using a lot of words that bring into these kind of, like kids don't have any filter, right? Kids can be weird and nobody judges them. But when we grow up, we're kind of, where these judgments are imposed on us that we should act and control ourselves in certain ways. So does that kind of influence?
I take offense to that, Brett. Kids are not weird. Adults are weird. Kids are perfectly fine. It's the adults that make it weird.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, kids are weird too, but in a beautiful way. I mean, we're all weird. But what I really got from this experiences in this international youth organization was that I was allowed to just try stuff. I was 18 or 19. I was running workshops for other 18 and 19 years olds, and I could just try out stuff, and I could pretend like I know stuff. And chances are I knew a little bit more than the others because I read that one article or something, and I could just experiment, and it was okay. And I was given, the responsibility to take care of some 14 or 15 years old for a weekend without any parents. And I was like 18 or 19. And, it was okay. It was fine. And we did some really cool, creative stuff because the threshold for failure was really low. Like, if at the end of this everybody had a great time, that was all really everybody cared for. But if you could make people learn something, or if you could make people think about a topic that maybe they've never thought about before, that would be an additional value, So through this, I think what I learned was all these experiential learning methodologies and all of these, what sometimes maybe referred to as games. I think of them as exercises, right? Where you can do the same stuff with a group of managers and they will be blown away by the incredible innovativeness of it. This is stuff in the youth field we've been doing for like decades, and it's just normal, you know? And then there's some really crazy experimental stuff that isn't normal. But a lot of these things that you do in team building activities or in leadership development that put people in a situation where they are a little bit uncomfortable, but they figure out a way how to solve a problem. That's not innovative in the youth field. That's really innovative sometimes in the adult education field. And I think this is where just the playfulness, or just this, I think what I got from this work in this youth organization was this deep feeling of I can help other people learn stuff. And that's just a confidence that I can walk into a room with saying, I'm fine. And everybody here is fine. And we don't have to pretend like we're not. And we don't have to pretend like we need to convince anybody to be someone who we're not. We can just be ourselves. And that's going to be much better than trying to be anybody who we're not. And we're going to do really cool stuff together. And whenever you put a group of people into a room with each other, they're going to do some really cool stuff as long as they get to be themselves. As soon as they try to be someone else, they're not going to go do cool stuff. They're going to do cool stuff when they get to be themselves. And I think this is something that's really important for me.
So I have now you triggered my curiosity, right? When you say you do stuff in the adult education field that may be perceived as some crazy stuff by the adults in the room, I want to hear one example. Can you outline one of these exercises or games? No, we're going to call them exercises because we're dealing with adults who have serious shit to work out, right? So can you walk us through one of those exercises that may appear not to be normal and that you consistently have been getting great results with?
Among us trainers also today, a lot of this will not be innovative. But if you have a group of engineers that went through engineering university and then suddenly they're in the leadership program, they will have never had participatory educational experience. So I'm not going to say that any of this is, I'm different than most other trainers that are going to watch this. But like stuff that I do, I really like this exercise with the magic stick, where you have a group of people, you put a stick on their fingers, and their task is to put the stick on the floor, and the stick inevitably goes up. And it doesn't make any sense in everybody's brain, in no one's brain, that the stick goes up. And they try really hard to put the stick down, and they can't do it. And it really messes with everybody, and they're laughing, and some people are stepping out, and some people think this is so silly, I'm not going to engage it. Some people get really angry because they think it's everybody else's fault. And so you can debrief this really, really beautiful when, you thought X was going to happen, but then the opposite happened. When else does this happen at work? Oh, all the time in intercultural, like all the time? Okay, so how do people react when something happens that's not normal? That for them is not normal. And one of the most normal things that we all share is an experience of gravity, right? That's really normal. So when something slightly more not normal happens, how do people behave? Oh, in the same ways, they get aggressive, or they detach themselves, or they laugh about it, but no one is really trying to step away and really understand what actually happens, because your amygdala is active, and etc., etc. So you can go from there into the brain and all of that kind of stuff. And so, but to have this emotional trigger, or what I also do after I explain some intercultural dimensions, for example, on the next day I put people in small groups, I give them clay, and I tell them to create a 3-dimensional statue that represents one of those dimensions, and so they have to discuss with each other, how are we going to represent this theoretical idea in a 3-dimensional way with our hands and clay, and then explain it to the others what we saw in this dimension that we can now represent in a 3-dimensional way with clay, And so people play, but they're discussing and they're trying to make connections between, this is something that I thought I understood abstractly, but now I have to make it concrete. And how do I put all of these concrete things in a new way? And it gets your brain going in a different way. And it's really fun, but it's also, it channels, the neurons in ways that you create new pathways. And that's really exciting.
Sure. I was going to ask you about your book. I ordered your book earlier this week, but usually I'm actually enraged because usually Amazon can deliver stuff the next day. What's going on here? we get so used to what we're used to, right? But no, it's going to be delivered this afternoon. So I'm not going to have I wanted to put up your book and I want to read it. So you've got there it is, The Learner's Journey. So tell us about the book. Tell us when did you write it? What was your driver to write the book, and what is it about? What are people going to learn from The Learner's Journey?
All right. So the book I wrote a year and a half ago. I mean, I wrote it over like 2 years or something, but it was published a bit more than a year ago, I think. And the book is essentially using storytelling as a design principle to create learning experiences. And so it builds on the idea that people tend to experience themselves and they tend to experience important experiences in story form. And so we have this experiencing self that's just in the now and takes in the world, and then our remembering self is a storyteller. So it takes our experiences and puts it into a context of story form in a way. Our memories have the shape of a story in that sense, right? So with ourselves as the protagonist, and so we all of these really transformative experiences, we can tell a story about them. And we can tell a story about them because we remember them as a story. And so from this basic idea, I then thought, okay, so if people are actually experiencing meaningful experiences in story form, wouldn't it then make sense if I want to create a meaningful experience in my learning event, if that's a training or a coaching process or a conference or whatever, if I want to create a meaningful, transformative learning experience, wouldn't it make sense to already build it along the structure, around the architecture of a story, so that I facilitate the remembering process, right? So that I take those two shapes together and I design along the shape that it's being remembered as anyway. And so I thought, okay, let me, experiment with that. And I also thought, yeah, most of the trainings that I ran that were really great, they somehow had, a beginning, a middle with a climax, and then an end, very similar to stories. But maybe I can make that a little bit more nuanced or a little bit more sophisticated. And so I then started to use the story circle. You probably heard of The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. And there is a simplified version of that called the Story Circle by Dan Harmon, creator of Rick and Morty and Community. So not quite as academic and not quite as methodological and theological as Joseph Campbell, but only 8 steps, not 17. So a lot easier for me to work with, and also a little bit more general, not so myth specific as Joseph Campbell's work. But I mean, Joseph Campbell is the OG in a way, and Dan Harmon built on his work, and I'm building on Dan Harmon's work. So it's all iterative anyway. And so the story circle has 8 phases basically: protagonist, need, go, search, find, take, return, change. And that is essentially every action film you've ever watched. That's every romantic comedy you've ever watched. That's definitely every Marvel film you've ever watched. That's every that's Star Wars, that's Harry Potter, that's all the big stories that we have a very easy time following, right? And so it turns out these 8 phases work really, really well in creating learning experiences. And so you start with the protagonist, and the protagonists are the learners. And it also really helps to detach yourself as a trainer, because sometimes maybe we think it's about us and it's not about us, but it's really nice to be on that stage in front of the people and you tell them cool stuff. So it feels sometimes maybe it's about me, but it's not, right? So to have this remembering that it's about the learner. They are the heroes of this journey. They are the protagonists of this thing that I'm designing for them. And then to really see them, to understand their world, to understand who they are, to understand the context within which this is happening, that where you get to meet them, etc., etc. And then the need phase is essentially where you need to connect the world how it is to how it should be. And your task is to bring them to that other place where they create the world, or where they are the kinds of people who they would like to be. That is in contrast to how they are now. And if that gap is not clear, why should anybody bother going on a learning journey with you, right? So you either need to connect with a question that they already have, or you need to give them a really great question that they now have. So for example, this example with the magic stick exercise, right? Suddenly something happens that they don't understand, and boom, there they have a question. And now you're not trying to convince them that what it is that you want to share with them is important for them. Now they already have a question, so you're just offering an answer to a question that they already have. And they are motivated to work because they want to solve this riddle for themselves, right? So this is a really important phase. And then we jump into the unknown. We go into the space where there's disorder, there's chaos, it's into the unknown, basically, like Elsa and Frozen 2. And that's all about then experimenting. And this is where we probably do all the activities that we would typically associate with a training program. So there's reading, there's exercises, there's discussions, there's experimentation, there's interesting failures, there is failing forward, there is repeating something over and over until you really get it, etc., etc. So that we get to the fine stage. And the fine stage is then a lot more in the hands of the learners, where it's really about having that insight, having that aha moment, having that light bulb go on, having that paradigm shift, having that, oh wow, you mean there isn't a reality and objectivity is a bit of a myth, and actually everybody has a subjective view, and culture has a really big influence into how we see the world, and it makes sense to be curious, not just who people are, but how they create this reality that they live in, etc., etc. This paradigm shift where suddenly you see the different world, where suddenly you see the matrix, where suddenly you understand there is that you are, Darth Vader's sons or whatever, or you are a Jedi, like where you make that new understanding that changes everything. And then you take that. So that means you go from having had that insight to making it your own. I call this stage like incorporation. And that has a corpus in it, right? So you make it part of your own body. It's not this, I learned this, but I am now someone who knows this. And that's a big difference, right? Because you make it part of your identity. I am now someone who understands nonviolent communication, and I am now someone who communicates nonviolently, right? It's a big difference, and we need to facilitate this process. And then strategize the return back into the old world, because the training room is a very special space. The coaching conversation is a very special space. But there's a whole world around it where there are people who are going to be your allies in implementing the things that you've learned. And there are people who have a very legitimate interest in you not having learned that, in you not bringing change. And you need to prepare for that, and you need to strategize that, and you need to support the people you've been accompanying on this transformative journey to bring that back and create that change and be that change and make that difference. And so I've designed management retreats, I've designed 1-day trainings, 2-day trainings, 45-minute inputs. I've designed a whole semester with students along this path. It's very adaptable, because it's not about here's a step-by-step, but it's about here's a logical process, here's a flow that your learners are on anyway. And you can design experiences around that journey that will have a very innate forward momentum, because everything that happens builds on what happened before and prepares for what happens next, and it has a a destiny that is the answer to the need that you've highlighted in the beginning, etc., etc. For me, it works really, really well. And so if it works for other people, that makes me really happy. Just in the beginning of this week, I was invited at the 𝙈𝙬𝙤 Management School in Lille, and they've actually used this format to design their entire bachelor's program. So they've now designed a whole 3-year academic process as a learning journey that has this design principle built into how they are creating this academic journey, which, I was blown away by, but it also is really awesome that an educational institution like that would work this student-centrically. So I was really, really happy about that.
So if I read you, which I will, this is going on my Amazon list, or any other online retailer out there. Just making that clear. I'm sure there's other sources to get the book. Will I learn as a reader of your book how to design my training activities in a learner's journey? Is it a manual, or is it only is it exemplifying one learner's journey that you've designed, or is there a blueprint how anyone can adapt it?
Yeah, it has a couple of examples in the end to showcase how I've used this, but essentially it's a step-by-step manual, but it's not about do this and then do that. It's about think about this and then think about that. It essentially has more questions than it has answers, because it's supposed to be for people who design learning experiences. And so I've heard from managers who are not running trainings, but they use this to understand how they can better support their team members in their daily one-on-ones or in their weekly or monthly one-on-ones, and into how they create challenges for their team that flows on a learning journey. And I also heard from someone who just read this and then understood why she excelled in some things in school and some things just didn't work for her in school, and it made her feel like, all right, I was just not on the right journey, and it really clarified this for her, and that was also really beautiful. So it's mostly a book that it gives a little bit of a context in the beginning about learning and about the balance between challenge and safety that is so important to allow for real meaningful learning, because we need to feel safe enough to be able to fail, and without failure you can't learn. So you need to have this sense of safety, but you also need to have this sense of challenge so that it's worth it. All right, so how to find that balance between challenge and safety, and then it goes through each stage, and it exemplifies a little bit what might be important to think about in that stage of facilitating and preparing your learning experience that you want to do with the people that you are privileged to accompany.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, and in listening to you talk about this as something that pretty much everybody has seen in movies and books that they've read and things like that, then does this approach then become quite culturally, it really is approached or received by many people from different cultures, no matter what their cultural influence are? So I'm thinking about when we talk about more linear thinking cultures, that we say, certain cultures might learn in step-by-step processes. Other cultures are more contextual. It's a wider thing, but this sort of sounds like it scratches all those kind of itches. Would that be true? Is that your experience in applying this program with youth from all around the world, for example?
I mean, I've not used it with a youth program because I've not been working directly with young people for a while now. I think there are younger people who are better equipped to do that. But to me, this very first stage, right, the protagonist focus, for me, that is such a crucial step where you really care about understanding who is it that you get to accompany. Right? And this is where you can then see, all right, I have a group that is very culturally diverse. What does that mean for the learning journey I want to take them on? Or I have a group that has these priority, or that has that power structure within their group, or that has this kind of outlook onto the world. And that is not just regional culturally specific. That could also mean, okay, I'm working with a group of marketing people, or I'm working with the accounting department, right? They may have different, very distinctly different cultures, right? Some might be more tight, some might be more loose, to borrow Michel Gelfard's terminologies here, but or some might be more okay with uncertainty and playfulness and creativity, and others might feel that they lose face in front of the other people in the room when they become too playful, etc., etc. Right? So to really understand, who is it that I get to accompany? And this element of companionship is really, really important for me, right? This element of, I am in the service of the learners that I get to accompany. I am privileged to be on their journey with them. And so that means if they need me to present them facts and figures for a while so that they feel comfortable enough to know that they've ticked that, and then they can become more playful, that's fine. That means I need to really make sure they get that, because that enables them to then go to the next stage. So it's very, and that's where this humanity basically comes back in, is that there is no one way to run a great training. I think the best training or the best learning experience, whether it's a workshop or a conference or a coaching process, is to really care deeply and authentically and lovingly about the people you get to accompany for a while on their journey, and to make sure that you are a constructive and productive and valuable part of their journey. And that can mean sometimes challenging them, right? That doesn't mean always pampering them, but that challenge comes from, all right, I believe you can go further than this. I believe you can think 3 more whys before you are satisfied with your own answer. I believe that you can do this, but then also create spaces where people can say, like, okay, I need to relax now a little bit. That was hard, you know.
Yeah.
What was your biggest pushback that you may have received, especially when you do this in corporate settings, when you have these leadership types who sometimes reluctantly join a learning group because somebody else gently asked them to participate in or they may have actually been, I've seen that in my groups, that those leaders within a group who initiate the training can sometimes be the ones who want to shine in front of the group, that I know this all, and you weren't listening to me, but now we brought in somebody from the outside and they're telling you. So they want to have their own greatness confirmed. What have been some of the biggest pushbacks you've experienced in those learning journey designs that you led?
You are sometimes too explicit about the methodology or the approach. People might think it's, like, now we just want the knowledge, right? Or now we just want the skills, please. Just tell us what to do. And from my experience, the biggest pushback is disengagement. Like when I have a person in the room that just leans back and they're just not there. But that then also means that this is not for them. Like just a couple of weeks ago, I had a training where, and it was about leadership, but it was about lateral leadership. So leading people who don't have a direct authority to actually tell what to do, but leading your peers, leading someone else, leading your leaders, right? And I pushed him to make a choice for the next day, to be aware of who might require some leadership around him and to choose to give it to them, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, why? That's not my job. Why should I want to do that? And then I asked, well, you are in a training on lateral leadership. why are you here? And he said, because I was told to be here. And then I just said, well, I'm really sorry, but you may be in the wrong place. You can be here, and then I challenge you to choose to do something that is not part of your job description, or you can leave. That's totally fine. Maybe you were misinformed what this is about, but I'm challenging you to choose. And then he sat for a while and didn't say much. And then he acted. He accepted my challenge. And that was a really beautiful moment, because it was like, okay, he realized that he actually has agency over making that choice. He doesn't have to make that choice. He can make himself a little bit more work by choosing leadership, right, when there is an opportunity to lead. But that it's his choice. And that was a moment when he decided for himself, I will choose this. And then he actually engaged. And that was great.
So I'm thinking then that, you know, there's a tendency when we actually have a kind of a power as trainers and facilitators over the people that we're training. But you're using a lot of the terminology, like, I'm grateful to be on this journey with you, right? So even when that person who was resistant up front, as soon as they cross that line and they make the decision for themselves, you get to actually even then say, well, now I'm so grateful you've made the decision, and now I get the chance to do that, rather than, I told you so, I told you I can tell you to do this, right? That's a different level of then continuing the learning, right? I could see that, just to be able, there's a tendency for us to just feel, you know, good about ourselves about being able to convince people.
It might be a weird word in the space that we operate in, but one concept or one word that really resonates with me in being one of the foundational competencies for really impactful trainers or learning companions is love, right? And not in a hokey pokey way, but loving the humanity of the people you engage with. You can be annoyed by them to no end, right? But then to take that one step further and see, but I see a human behind this annoying behavior, and I have a lot of love for this annoying human behind this annoying behavior. And I want to understand where this annoying behavior comes from. Does it come from a need to be seen? Does it come from a need to show that you don't need this? Does it come from an embarrassment that you don't know this? Does it, like, where does it come from? It comes from there's some source of pain in there, or some source of pride in there. And let me see it. Let me see you. And then when someone realizes that you actually see them, and you actually want to see them behind the facade that they put up to protect themselves, they will open up maybe a little bit. And then you can say, okay, hi, nice to see you behind this curtain. Are you ready to come here with me? I think you'll find this interesting over here. And then maybe they choose. And then and maybe they don't choose, and maybe they have a really good reason for that too. And to just be in touch with your own humanity, in the sense that you can say, like, okay, I can be a human being in this room. I don't have to pretend like I'm the expert of everything, or I'm untouchable, or I'm not here fully. I can be here fully, and I can see the human beings in their fullness as well. And then it gets really rich, you know, then it gets really, that's really beautiful. Like, that's what I do this for.
Yeah.
Christian.
Is it possible, and I think I know the answer, is it possible that it requires a very humble teacher or facilitator to do this? Because I think the three of us, we know plenty of examples, even within our own field, who really enjoy being the lecturer, a word that I have a visceral reaction to. When people, all those of you are watching this, and your LinkedIn bio says, or one of your bullet points in your career list in your CV is, I'm a lecturer at something, I invite you to rethink that. That may come across as you're like somebody who likes to be on that pedestal and talk down to people who don't live on your level of enlightenment. So what you said in the beginning, Bastian, is something that's been part of my journey. And I think we come from a similar, let's say, academic upbringing. Since we're both German, we to a certain degree enjoyed the beauty and the benefits of the German educational system, which sometimes has a tendency to be lecturing rather than being participatory. So I've been learning to overcome this tendency to lecture, but it takes a fully engaged and fully committed individual to do that, and somebody, as you said, recognizes their own humanity and their own flaws and faults and knows that they don't have all the answers and doesn't take themselves too serious in that situation, and sees the benefit of the learners as the storyline, not their heroism being the one who imparts new information and wisdom upon them, right?
I have a bigger beef with the term thought leader. Like, I think that's totally and entirely ridiculous. But I mean, with lecture, I don't have that much of a problem because it's an actual job description in some universities. So if that's your job title, that's fine. And I also don't think that there isn't a place for great presentations. Like you can watch a TED Talk and be blown away by it. You can watch, I recently watched Robert Sapolsky, the author of one of my favorite books ever in the world. Like, this is incredible. And he has his lecture at Stanford, his lecture series at Stanford on YouTube. You can watch it for free. It's incredible. And he lectures for an hour and a half. And it's wonderful. It's amazing. And it's incredible. It's really, really good. But that doesn't mean that you need to do it all the time. Like, you can have a conversation, and that's a great educational method. You can have an experience, that's a great educational method. You can do a game, that's a great educational method. You can do a really good presentation, that's a great educational method. If you rely on one of them all the time, then you're not very versatile in your tool arsenal as a craftsperson that has a job to do, and your job is to facilitate someone else's learning process. So whatever is the tool to facilitate someone else's learning process, use that. And humility, I think, like, without, I don't know anybody who I would consider great who isn't humble. Like, to me, those two things, they are deeply entwined with each other, because with greatness, like with the more you know what you don't know. And the more you've experienced, the more you know what you haven't experienced. The more you've been out in the world, the more you've experienced your own limitations. The more you've reflected and thought about yourself, the deeper is your awareness about your own flaws. So there is like, anybody that presents themselves flawlessly, I have, the guy from the A-Team would probably say, I pity the fool. But it's with, like, for me, gratitude is such an important component of life. Like, I get to do this work. It's an incredible privilege. Like, I've never been employed in my life as of yet. I came out of university and went into freelancing, and it's an incredible privilege that someone would pay me money to do something that makes me really happy and that fulfills me and that gives me this efficacy of knowing that I just made a positive contribution to someone else's life. Like, that's amazing. No? And so to not be deeply thankful for that, like, how can you not be? I don't understand it. And so with that comes humility, with that comes gratitude, with that comes just, it's, to me, those are very much entwined with each other. And this generosity, like to be allowed to be generous, like when you, being allowed to be generous is a rare gift. Like, you can only really give someone something when you have something. And one thing that we all have is our humanity, and one thing that we all have is our experiences, and one thing that we all have is our care for someone else, and we get to give that. And every time I give someone something that is my choice to give, I gain as much as the other person, and so it's very fulfilling. It's very it's a beautiful circle, you know.
That's
I think there's a
fantastic.
book about this, The Giver's Gain. I forget who wrote it, but that's what this reminds me of. This was beautiful, Bastian. I wish we could talk about this all day, all night, but I have a feeling that the Polish evening is approaching rapidly, and the weekend is at your doorstep already, maybe inside the building. So we're not gonna take the weekend away from you. This was enlightening. I learned a lot, and that's the purpose of this whole program, is to make us all smarter. So mission accomplished when it comes to me. I don't know, Brett already knows a lot, so I don't know if
No. I'm the same as Bastian. I always tell clients that I am learning as I'm teaching, and if you're not in that two-way street, it is really a failed process. And I think the humility, I identify with it, but I probably even find myself not practicing it, even though I come from a culture it is self-deprecating and get called out on it. There are certain amounts of time that we just have to remind ourselves of the gratitude we have to do the work we do. And I agree with you, Bastian, that this, I just can't believe people send me checks to do this work. It is a gift that I will always be thankful for, and you've just put it in so eloquently, and I can't wait to get the book today so I can start implementing this. So thank you, dziękuję bardzo, miłego weekend, and thank you again for this wonderful chat. It's been great. To everybody listening, if you're watching this live or you're watching on the replay, please put your comments, your experience of teaching, and where you found your humility and where that's been effective, and possibly, and certainly we recommend Bastian's book, even though I haven't read it yet and I want to read it. It will come in the mail, and I will maybe do another episode to say, well, I found out about this. Thank you, everybody. We're grateful for you for listening. That is the main thing. We're grateful for you after 170 episodes, many, many more to come. And thank you so much, Bastian, for being our very honored guest today.
And if he gets to speak Polish, we get to speak German, right? So vielen Dank, dass du da warst. Wunderschönes Wochenende. Und wer auch sonst immer noch aus dem deutschsprachigen Raum zuschaut, wir machen das jeden Wochentag. Be back, all right? Thanks, everybody. Two chaps, many cultures.